Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Avorion episode 41. I'm Enigmius, and today we're continuing with the Serpovectem build. We're working around the wings like we've been doing for the last couple of episodes, and we're going to finish it off today, that area around the wings. We're going to get all the transitions done, we're going to get it all taken care of so that we can move on to other parts of the ship. It's taken a little while because compound curves and things intersecting always require a little bit of goofing around just to kind of experiment and find, first of all, how things want to fit together on their own, and whether or not we're happy with it, and if not, what are we unhappy with and how can we fix it. That's basically the process of determining exactly what we're doing, where, and why. All in all, I'm pretty happy with the way the hull is taking shape. It's not as uniform as I kind of thought it would be. It has sort of, when you look at it, it feels like it's got a number of different sort of components that are attached together to make up the hull. And I don't mind that because sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you want things to be absolutely uniform and everything's smooth and everything looks like it was designed to be as straightforward as possible, and other times having a little bit of dimension to things kind of gives it a little something extra. It could go either way, realistically. In this case, I'm pretty happy with this whole idea that it's different pieces sort of coming together into one larger piece, and a certain amount of thought is being given to sort of the transitions where that happens, and trying to make sure that they look convincing. The worst thing that can happen is you have these different things and they're coming together, but when you look at them, the transitions just look messy, they look sloppy, and they look off. And that's where saying that you did it on purpose means you lose credibility, because it doesn't look like it was done on purpose. It looks like it was just done, and then the decision was made to accept it regardless of what we may have liked in an ideal situation. So there's a little bit of reworking that you're seeing happening, just sort of where everything fits together. But overall, we're getting to the point now where we're starting to build up speed. You can see we were actually, at this point here on the upper part of the hull, we're past the wing already. It's done. It's absolutely taken care of. We can rework little parts of the transitions, little parts where the wing connects to the hull if we want, but we're past that part, and that was a big deal, because this is where things start to pick up speed rather substantially. We don't have to do an enormous amount of planning. We don't have to think about transitions so much. We can just sort of start filling things in with the blocks that make sense for the position where they're being placed, and go from there. We've got all these different profiles that we've set up for ourselves to kind of make things go a little bit quicker and easier. This specific part here, I just removed a bunch of blocks, and now I'm going down and I'm placing basically what might look like the same kinds of blocks in their place. This was where we had that little fillet, that little strip that was sticking up above that top profile section, and it gave us those little shadow marks down the sides that indicate that things weren't perfectly aligned. And I just decided to get rid of those elements that were causing that, so that we don't have that distraction. So I like those shadow lines in some circumstances. In some places they can add, this sense of depth if things line up properly. But the way that they're set up, other times they just look like scorch marks in really weird places. In this case, I felt like they were just too much like scorch marks in weird places, and they were also in a fairly prominent part of the ship. When you talk about not only the top of the ship, but also the top of the ship on a slope, so that if you're looking at the ship from the front, it's right there in front of you. So plenty of incentive to try and figure something else out. And then I also wanted to rework this section as well, just because the way that everything was coming together, I didn't feel like we were getting the sort of shape that I was looking for. We had a bunch of things that weren't properly lined up, and the easiest way to get rid of that was to just kind of pull a bunch of stuff out and then use one larger block to fill in the gap so that it was a smooth, flat sort of segment instead of all these weird little pieces that we had. Now we're moving to the underside, and this is the last little bit that we have left to work around the wings, and you can see we don't have a lot before we're past the wings on the underside as well. And it was also one of those areas where it was fairly easy to fill things in along the underside in sort of large chunks, just because of the way the geometry sort of worked out. And now I'm just trying to figure out what piece I can stick in this particular spot to fill it all in and make it look like what I had in mind, which is done. It's taken care of. We're very nearly past the spot with the wing, and then we have this sort of large outer hull section that's clearly defined based on the profiles that we put in place, and it's just a matter of filling everything in. I didn't realize until I started working on it just how time consuming it would be. It's easy. It's something that I don't mind doing it. Just because it's time consuming doesn't make it bad. I think it's something that, you know, those little pieces of self-serving advice that I like to hand out from time to time, or at least offer to people who get stuck in certain things and maybe are thinking that there's something wrong with them if it's taking a long time. It's supposed to be something that we're doing because we enjoy it anyways, so if it takes a certain amount of time, that's probably good, as long as it's engaging enough that we don't feel like we're detached from the process. I can understand if someone was doing it and feeling like they were just completely on autopilot and they just kind of zone out for a while, and then 15 minutes passes and they don't even really realize it was 15 minutes, but they just feel like they haven't gotten a lot done while they were semi-conscious. In this case, I spent a fairly significant amount of time starting to fill in the hull. Once all of the stuff around the wings was done, once all the transitions were done, and that's all we had was filling in some fairly straightforward shapes and profiles. 2 hours to do not even the entire upper hull from the wings back, just filling it all in. That's a fairly substantial amount of time, and I got to thinking about it in the context of how I would present it to you guys, so that you have an opportunity to see how it sort of came together, and highlight how quick and easy it was just by the very nature of the process of getting everything filled in, without letting it get too kind of tedious, too heavy, too much stuff going on without actually showing enough progress. So what I ultimately decided to do was take those specific sections where that's really all I was doing, is filling things in. Very simple, straightforward, the same kinds of blocks, the same kinds of orientations, working in strips, and speed it up a little bit more in the playback. So instead of the usual 4 times normal speed that we see this at, we're going to be doing somewhere around 12 times the normal speed for just a few minutes as we fill this stuff in and kind of take advantage of the way that we've set ourselves up to this point to get it done fairly quickly. And there'll be a few little times where you'll see that I kind of wander off and do a little bit here, a little bit something there. It's not 100% just stacking strips, but it does go very quickly and very easily. And that's probably what I'll do for the rest of the hull as well, is rather than trying to decide which parts are interesting and which parts aren't, we'll just speed it up so that it happens so fast you almost lose track of how much we're covering within a certain span of time. And then we can carry on with the more detailed sections at the regular 4 times normal speed. So this is the 12 times speed sort of presentation, so that you have an opportunity to see everything as it goes into place. We've got this little narrow side profile that we've been working with, and it's kind of easy to forget that it was ever even there because we spent so much time around the wings. And like I mentioned in the last episode, I accidentally wiped out that profile while I was working around the wings. But now we're back to it. Of course, we've got the profile along the top of the ship that's sort of defining that particular shape. So now, like I've been saying, it's at this stage where the first step is to just start throwing blocks where they want to fit and see how it works out. And by and large, what I found was that I was happy with the way that it was working out. I had a friend once who had a very large snake for a pet. It was either a python or a boa constrictor. I could never remember which one. And I was over at his place once, and he asked me to help him carry the snake from the basement where it had a cage to the bathtub upstairs, because apparently that was very important for the snake, was to be soaked in the bathtub. I don't know how to take care of snakes, but that's what he said. He needed help getting the snake into the bathtub upstairs. So I was helping him carry the snake, and the snake was large enough that its body, when it was in my hands, I had to have my hands open as wide as they could go in order to cradle the entire width of this snake's body. And I could actually feel there was a point where just how I ended up lifting up the snake, there were a couple of scales that had sort of lifted up, and I had my finger under them, and I thought, if I was that snake, that might be a little bit uncomfortable. And then I looked up, and here's the snake wrapped around my friend's neck, looking back at me, and it's just looking at me, and its tongue is flicking, and I'm thinking I'm gonna get eaten before we even get up the stairs. Fortunately, I wasn't. But I learned a certain amount about the way a snake's body sort of responds to gravity, and how it's not a cylinder kind of sitting on the ground or wherever it happens to be. When it's in contact with something solid, it kind of flattens out at the bottom, and it's got this contour that's a little bit more, it looks almost flabby. Though you would never, holding the snake, you would never dream of calling it flabby, but you get the idea. There was a profile, and it was the shape of the snake's body that was different from just this uniform sort of cylinder, and that's how this actually started to end up. Was we had that sort of flattened on the bottom kind of look to it that was starting to emerge. We'll see more of it when we get around to the underside of the hull. But basically, I'm pretty happy with the way that the hull is taking shape. I started to fill in around the back, you saw there, briefly, and then I realized that I still have to get the engines, and the engines are going to be mounted primarily in that area, so I didn't want to cover it up. So I decided to set that aside for the time being, and we'll get some engines in there before we do the final fill-in in that specific part of the ship. But the next episode, I expect that we'll continue filling in the hull, at least for part of the episode. And then also we'll start working on some of the other sections that we have to add or fill in or modify or extend, or whatever we have to do to get ready to start adding in all of the other extra components and important systems that we have to have in the ship. So we're making, I think, good progress now. The filling in of the hull is going to go much, much faster now that we're past the wings. And I've got some fairly concrete ideas for the things that I want to be doing in other parts of the ship, as well as, you know, the option to always modify based on ideas that come to me later on. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes, the easiest way to do that, of course, as always, is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.